Now, you mentioned yesterday that when you got to Fairview, the defendant began kicking your door.
Yes,
When you looked out, you didn't see anything.
I did not.
And at some point, you ran over to where Miss Reed was.
Yes.
Tell us what your first observations are when you get close to the defendant.
Well, it was a shape of a body, like the length of a body, shape of a body. She ran over, and I said, oh, my God. I jumped out of the car. I ran over, and she was lifting up his shirt to try and warm him, I guess. So I went over to his head, and I began to dig his head out of the snow.
Can you take us back and describe for us what you're seeing?
His body was completely covered, but his head was completely covered. So I started to dig around his face and his eyes, and his left eye was fine, but his right eye looked like it was huge, like he had something happen to it. And after that, I told Karen to get off him. We were going to start CPR. I had been certified at work through the American Red Cross, so I knew chest compressions were more important. So I started to do chest compressions, and I yelled to Jen and told her to call 911. Karen was trying to do mouth-to-mouth. I don't know if she knew what she was doing, but I knew chest compressions were more important, so I concentrated on that. I yelled for Jen. I carry blankets. I have 2 kids, so I carry blankets in the car, so I yelled to Jen to get the blankets. I don't know what I thought I was doing with blankets, but I wrapped them around his head, just thinking we're trying to warm him up. He was covered in snow.
When you finally get to the hospital, take us through your first steps. What happens?
We finally get to the hospital. We walked in. Paul, John's brother, was there. We went over to him, and then Susanna, Mrs. O'Keefe's niece, came out from her office and offered to take me to the bathroom to wash up because I had blood all over my hands. So I went into the bathroom, and I asked her afterwards if she could take me to the chapel so I could say a prayer. So she did. She took me to the chapel, and then when I came out, she took me into her office and explained to me that a Dr. Rice was going to come talk to the family and take them into an office and talk to the family, and then the family would be able to go see John.
Did you get a chance to see John?
I did.
Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about what you saw?
Objection.
I waited in the waiting area. I spoke to my mom. Phone calls were coming in because people had heard what happened. And Mrs. O'Keefe, the family went in to see Dr. Rice. I watched them go in. I watched them walk down a hallway. And then when they came back out, Mrs. O'Keefe told me he was gone.
Objection. Strike that statement, folks. It's no part of the record.
Without telling us what anybody said to you, please just share with us what you saw.
I went into the hospital room, and John was in a neck brace. At this point, there was a trail of blood going toward the gurney or the bed that he was on. This time, both eyes were filled with blood. They looked like raccoons. That's the only way to describe it. I thought he was going to look better seeing him in the hospital because he had been worked on, but he was not. There was much more blood.
Were there any other ways that John looked different in the hospital than when you first brushed the snow off his face in the front of Fairview?
When I brushed the snow off his face, his left eye was fine. It had an ice cube on it that I pulled off, but the right eye was out to here, like a golf ball. When I got to the hospital, both eyes were swollen with, it looked like blood. They looked purple.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
May I quickly approach sidebar? I'm going to show you a photograph.
Yeah.
You recognize it?
Yes, I do.
Is that how John looked?
Yes, he did.
I'd ask that the camera not film that, please.
I'd like to mark this as an exhibit. I will not publish it. May I approach her arm?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. After you last saw your friend John, what did you do?
After the hospital?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
After the hospital,
Yes.
I drove. Well, we went back into the corridor with the family, and Karen at one point called from the hospital asking me, she said her father was on his way and could I go over and greet him or bring him to the O'Keeffe's when he arrived, and she described him. Her father did arrive, so I went over and said, "Are you Mr. Reed?" or something of that nature, and I said, "Mr. O'Keeffe would like to speak to you." So Mr. Reed went over and spoke to Mr. O'Keeffe, and Paul and John's parents and I, we didn't know next steps. We were waiting to see if we could leave or if we have to give information, and eventually we were able to leave. So I drove Mr. O'Keeffe home, and Paul drove Mrs. O'Keeffe home to John's house.
Before you left John, did you take a bracelet from him?
When Mrs. O'Keeffe and I went in to see John in the hospital, there was a bracelet that was on his right wrist. It was a blue, like, rubber bracelet. And that bracelet was made when his sister passed away, and her husband, and he wore it all the time. Mrs. O'Keeffe still wears it to this day.